Could Anthony Richardson actually go number one in the NFL draft? We're going to break that down and more on today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Let's roll, baby.
Woo!
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, and it is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. We got a lot to discuss on today's show. Could Anthony Richardson go number one in the draft? Which team should make the move up to number 3 and trade with the Arizona Cardinals? And then, of course, we'll finish things out with Alex's mystery segment of the week. Very excited for that. Before we dive into today's show, thank you guys for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first listen every day, Monday through Friday. NFL content on all platforms all year round and always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed and stay subscribed to the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Do want to give a shout out to my everydayers who are tuning in to the Locked On NFL podcast every single day throughout the week. Shout out to you guys. But Alex, let's dive right in here. Anthony Richardson, a guy who has truly elite athleticism, not only for his position, but for really any position. 6'4", 240 pounds. I mean, he was built in a lab, quite frankly. Now, of course, there are some consistency issues with his footwork, with his mechanics. People have their concerns, but obviously he is someone who teams are looking at the top of the draft. And if he could go number 3 or he could go number 4, then it stands to reason that he could go number 1. So I know that you wanted to pose the question in a certain way. What is the exact question that we are looking to answer here about Anthony Richardson?
Could Anthony Richardson go number 1 overall? It's a vast distinction between should or could. Right. And the reason why I asked could is because what Carolina did was something with a purpose. They knew who they wanted to take. And sure, you can go pomp and circumstance and all the circus around, we're going to bring in everybody, which I'm sure they will, to mind their P's and Q's and do anything else but, to disqualify everybody else to make sure that their pick's right. And I'll tell you what, Tyler, we did our mock draft. We both think that C.J. Stroud is the bona fide best quarterback prospect in this draft, right? Or the most draftable at number 1, at least.
Right.
Especially with, the tangibles and intangibles that he brings. But the ceiling is the highest for Anthony Richardson. I think because the floor could be the lowest. So it's of the 3 or 4 guys. So it's just this vast thing. But if I look at Carolina, I'm like, okay, they gave up everything. They know who it is. And if they draft him at 1, be like, okay, that makes sense. That's who they wanted to go get. Maybe they had to overpay a little bit, but they now have all of the power, and that there were even rumblings about them potentially trading back after trading all the way up. So we don't know exactly what Carolina's going to do, but that's why I asked it. Could he go number 1? I think 100%. Lou DiBiase from Locked On Eagles during our mock draft that'll be posted. We actually recorded and then we're posting it. He's like, am I the only one that thinks Anthony Richardson could go number 1? And I think it was Landon McCool from Locked On Cowboys. Thank you. There were a couple people who were like, why not? So I posed the question.
Well, I think that he could. The answer is yes. He could go number 1. And I think the biggest answer for me is, and you hate to do that thing where you're lifting a guy up by dragging other people down, but at the end of the day, I don't think any of the quarterbacks in this draft are Trevor Lawrence or Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? Bryce Young, good quarterback, but he's got average at best arm strength. 5'10", 190 pounds. He's going to be the smallest quarterback in the NFL the moment that he's drafted. I mean, all of that right there makes him not a Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow type prospect. You look at C.J. Stroud. We have talked, like you just said. I love C.J. Stroud as a prospect. He's my number 1 prospect, but he's not as highly of a ranked prospect as I would have had Lawrence or Burrow. You know what I mean? So Stroud while he does have great accuracy, he doesn't have elite arm strength. He doesn't showcase elite mobility as well. He's more of a pocket quarterback with the ability to move around a little bit. He's not going to be that dynamic threat that Jalen Hurts is or that Lamar Jackson is. So he doesn't give you that. I mean, you could say special, the accuracy of CJ Stroud is special, but outside of that, are there any special qualities?
Right.
I think Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, those guys are going to be pretty good quarterbacks, but I don't think they have the chance to be elite quarterbacks that are MVP candidates year in and year out. You know who does have the ceiling that could be an MVP candidate and be a Cam Newton type? It's Anthony Richardson. So if Carolina wants to take a swing on a guy who could potentially win the MVP and lead them to a Super Bowl one day and have the talent to do it, Richardson's the only answer. I'm not even putting Will Levis in this conversation. I'm a never Levis guy. Not a fan of Will Levis in the turnover plays. Don't like the attitude. He puts mayo in his coffee. That's a disqualifier right there for me. But at the end of the day, the question is, could Anthony Richardson go number one? And when you look at all of the three top quarterbacks and you think about which one has the potential to be the best out of all of them, it's Anthony Richardson. As long as that is true, then absolutely he could go number one.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I will say one of this as we look, we're going to pivot here in the next segment, but if I'm Houston or if I'm Carolina, and before Carolina traded up, it's like they're forcing it this year when you have two of the best prospects we've seen in a long time coming out next season. So I know it's hard to sell to a fan base. If I'm Houston, I'm drafting Will Anderson. It's like it doesn't matter. You have Caleb Williams on the other side, who is better than all of these quarterbacks. You have Drake May, who's probably better than all these quarterbacks. But even though there's been a couple mocks that have had, Houston not take a quarterback with Davis Mills, I know it's hard to sell not only to a fan base but to a new head coach, and they're trying to change the culture there. You need a quarterback for the future, but I just can't help but think Houston may be best served to wait a year. But to answer the question, Anthony Richardson could 100% go number one. Now, coming up next, there are a couple teams that have been tied to the Arizona Cardinals in a trade-up format for the number 3 overall pick. Who should trade up? Who 100% should trade up to number 3 overall and draft their quarterback for the future? Tyler and I are going to rip that next, but Tyler's got something to talk about first.
And I got to tell you about the best tasting protein bars in the entire galaxy. Look, if there was a protein bar draft, the number 1 ranked protein bar in the world is absolutely Built Bar. They could and should go number 1 because you get the best of both worlds when you try a Built Bar. You get all of the taste benefits of a candy bar because the bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they have amazing flavors too, like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, white chocolate cheesecake is one of my favorites. I know a lot of people around the Locked On offices love the coconut puff and the double chocolate bar as well. But it's a protein bar at the end of the day. So you need those health benefits, and they're low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Like I said, you really get the best of both worlds. Right now, what you should do is go to your nearest Walmart, go to your nearest Sam's Club. In the pharmacy section, you are going to find a box of Built Bars. And right now at Sam's Club, they have a 13-bar variety pack, so you can check out all of their best flavors. Go check out the best tasting protein bars ever, Built Bars. You can thank me later.
Locked On NFL Thursday. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Tyler Rowland, Locked On Titans. Thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Tyler, the team that I cover, the Arizona Cardinals, has a very, very interesting conundrum, embarrassment of riches as it pertains to possibilities at number 3 overall. Should the Arizona Cardinals trade back? To me, yes. But that's not what this segment is. Tyler, there are a handful of teams that have been linked to the Arizona Cardinals and potentially trading up. Indianapolis, Oakland at 7, even Detroit quickly at 6, and then your hometown kind of Tennessee Titans at 11, plus a couple other teams, according to a report from Adam Schefter. Which team should trade up to number 3 overall?
I think it's Indianapolis. I think the Colts got to make that move. I don't think look, if the Colts like Will Levis, personally, I don't believe all the smoke that we've been getting in the last week that Houston is not going to take a quarterback. I don't buy that for a second. I think Houston and Carolina take quarterbacks at the top, and somebody is going to go to number 3 to get the third quarterback, which I believe would be Anthony Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
Indianapolis it's going to be cheaper for them to make the move because they're only one spot behind Arizona. We have seen Indianapolis toil through veteran quarterbacks for years now and not make a difference. They have to learn that lesson. They can't. I like Gardner Minshew as a backup, but I think that we know that Gardner Minshew is nothing better than like 15 to 25 as a starting quarterback. He's not going to get you anywhere where the Colts haven't been the last few years. If anything, he's going to get the Colts too far away from getting a quarterback next year, but not close enough to being actually a good team. So for me, for the price that they'll have to pay compared to everybody else, the Colts cannot sit on their hands here like they have at quarterback the last few years. They need to make that cheap jump up one spot. And I think that would be appealing to Arizona as well because they can still get one of the top 5 prospects in the draft. Jump up one spot, make sure that you get the third quarterback, and you have somebody to build around going forward. I think the Colts would have a really hard time selling Gardner Minshew to their fan base going into next year. And I just personally, like I said in the last segment, I'm not a believer in Will Levis. I don't think he should go this high in the draft. I think it's a Kenny Pickett situation where people thought he might go high, but when he ends up going 20, I think you could see something like that, like 16 or 18 or 19 with Washington, Detroit, and Tampa Bay, respectively, for Levis. For me, it's got to be the Colts. They got to make that move and get the third quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, so one thing that I've been talking about on Locked On Cardinals all week and last week is, an ideal scenario for the Cardinals is 3 teams bidding for that spot and Indianapolis having to give up a first-round pick to move up one spot to where the Cardinals could still get Will Anderson and get a first-round pick. While it would probably be the easiest for Indy to move up, maybe give a second-round pick this year, hopefully that's something that the Cardinals would get. I think that, like, with all the influx that's happened with the Raiders, with all the influx that's happened with Tennessee, like, I don't think Indy is a quarterback away from anything.
No.
I don't think that Anthony Richardson, even if he's a Pro Bowler in year 3, they have so many problems with that team. Jonathan Taylor, now an injury concern. Just like every running back who gets Arian Foster, that's what I say on this show. Arian Foster was the best running back in the NFL for 3 years, had 400 touches a year, and you never hear from him again because his body breaks down. Because they're human beings. Remember that, everybody. These NFL players are human beings. And I don't think Anthony Richardson would necessarily tip the scale. If I'm Indy, I'm doing what I said Houston should do last segment. Tank this year. Play with Gardner Minshew.
Can I just say this? I don't think Indy is trying. I don't think
they are either.
Is like, we're a quarterback away, let's get him. I think they need to start from the bottom and draft a quarterback and then build around him. That's kind of what my thought process was.
Maybe, but I feel like with Indy, they've got enough. So they've got, Shaq Leonard. They've got Michael Pittman. They've got Jonathan Taylor. They've got an okay offensive line.
Yep.
They've got a pretty good defense. Like, with Gardner Minshew, the reason why is, like, I'm a hurry up and wait for them. They've hurried up. Now they need to wait. They've cut ties. They've trimmed the fat. Matt Ryan no longer, whatever. But, like, I think that they need to wait for the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. The team for me is Tennessee. Because Tennessee needs an identity. Like, Indy's identity is, like, they can play defense. They got Jonathan Taylor. That's kind of, even though the Indy's defense wasn't great last year because of injuries. But Tennessee needs an identity. Tennessee needs a kick in the nethers.
Yeah.
The nether regions of, like, what? We are going to draft this young man. We're going to cultivate him. Mike Vrabel is a great leader, a better leader than any of the other 2 head coaches in Indy and Vegas. Even though, he's not the perfect head coach, who the leader of that team is. I talk about him a lot.
Right.
Okay? Right. And they've got Derrick Henry there, so at least you've got some sort of semblance of at least a pseudo-rushing attack that can move the ball down the field and eat up clock. So I think it's Tennessee, and I don't think Tennessee's going to be bad enough to get Caleb Williams or Drake May next year anyways with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. So you
Yeah.
move up now, you get a guy with massive potential, and you know what? If it doesn't work, they're not that far back from where they are now. They lose draft capital, but Tyler, come on. Tennessee is not where they need to be. They don't have good
No.
wide receivers. They don't have a great defense. They don't have a great offensive line anymore. They've got Derrick Henry. So they need to take this shot. I don't think they can afford not to.
Well, that's fair. And what I will say is if the Titans are going to be a run first team and they're going to stay committed to that, excuse me, in today's NFL, I don't think you can be run first just with your running back. I think the only run first rushing attack that really works now is with your quarterback as well. And Anthony Richardson does give them the ability to have a run first offense that is more than one dimensional with just Derrick Henry running it. When we think of run first, we think the running back. But if the Titans want to stay with the identity of run first, they need a quarterback that can be a threat like a Jalen Hurts, like a Lamar Jackson. They need that sort of quarterback if they're going to stay with the run first mentality. Now, if the Titans want to change their mentality and become more modern with the rest of the NFL, then I think maybe you go a different direction. But yeah, if the Titans want to stay with that pound them, ground and pound, run first offense, the best way to continue to do that but get better is to add a quarterback that can actually feature in the run game because Tannehill is too old to do that. He can run those little read options on short yardage and get across the goal line, but he's in his mid-30s. Tannehill broke down last year, had ankle surgery, missed games. You can't have Ryan Tannehill running that type of offense. So while I'm skeptical of making that kind of move with where the Titans are at, I do understand what you're saying that if the Titans want to make a change, but keep somewhat of what they have as an identity with Derrick Henry, a running quarterback that can come in and be a Cam Newton type, like we talked about with Anthony Richardson, could make a ton of sense for them. But with that being said, we are going to move forward to what has become my favorite part of the show every week. It is Alex's mystery segment. You don't know what he's going to ask. I don't know what he's going to ask, but we're both going to find out together here in just a moment.
It's time, Tyler. Tyler Rowland, Locked On Titans at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter, at Clancy's Corner. I am Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Thanks for making Locked On NFL Thursday your first listen each and every day. So it's a mystery segment time. We always do this in the last segment, usually during the offseason, especially during kind of bridge times, like during the Ryan Tannehill times of a show between storylines with Ryan Tannehill kind of being the bridge quarterback, dictionary definition. Tyler, I thought you'd like that. I mean, just right over your head. So my mystery segment is going to be this. And it's interesting because I've thought about it, and there was a trade made this week that made me kind of spark this in my head. Okay. There are probably, 6, 7 teams that you look at in college football and you look at their defense and be like, draft any player from there. It doesn't matter. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State in some capacity, and, there's a couple other squads. Now, with Jeff Okudah getting traded for a 5th-round pick, former number 3 overall pick a couple years ago, Tyler, with edge rushers specifically, doesn't matter what college they go to. If they're elite, they're getting drafted. Buffalo, Texas A&M with a bad defense with Von Miller, things like that. You look at the talent from the edge rushing position and not necessarily the jersey he was wearing in college. Do you think we'll get to a point where you can look at cornerbacks coming out of college and just take their jersey off and look at their measurables, their performance, regardless of what conference they played in, and be able to draft them as such? Because what we've seen, there's been a whole bunch of Morris Claibornes going in the top 10. A whole bunch of Jeff Okudahs going in the top 10 because they go to Georgia, because they go to Alabama. Do you think that we're ever going to get to a point with corners being an elite position on defense, maybe the toughest position to play in football, not named quarterback? Do you think we're going to get to a point where you look beyond what conference they play in and actually look at the player and the measurables on the field in college?
Well, I don't think that NFL decision makers will ever truly go to just, I don't care where they played, because at the end of the day, the competition that they're going against does matter. It does matter the level of player that you're going against. But I think that certain teams that need certain traits out of their, like I go to Seattle and you look at Tariq Woolen. from last
Exactly.
year.
Yep.
Drafted in the mid rounds, 6'3", 6'4", lightning speed. When you look at the type of defense that Seattle plays with those boundary corners, playing in man, playing in third on the outside, press man, I think that certain teams will adapt that philosophy that you're talking about where they don't worry as much about the competition. It is more of a traits game. It is more of a measurables game for them because within their specific system, they need a guy who has these certain measurables and these certain traits. But on the flip side, I think that you will never truly get away from the old school mentality of, old school thought process in the NFL of, oh, well, this guy dominated at Alabama in the SEC. He's going to be great because he went against the best competition. You know what I mean? Like, you're never going to truly get away from that because the NFL is just an old dog's business at the end of the day. But I do think that certain teams, like I said, who have certain wants at certain positions will say, hey, this guy may have been awesome at Alabama, but like I'll give an example because I cover the Titans. Roger McCreary, second round pick for the Titans last year, played at Auburn, SEC, played very well against some of the top SEC receivers the last few years he was in college, like a Justin Jefferson or a Devontae Smith and stuff like that. But Roger McCreary has very short arms for a cornerback, and he's only about 5'10", 5'11". So no matter how well he played in the SEC against Alabama, against LSU, blah, 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 he's just not going to be what certain teams like Seattle are looking for. So with that in mind, I think you're right that certain teams will go more to the philosophy that you're explaining, but I think there will be certain teams that will always hold on to that old school belief of, hey, if they played in a Power 5 conference and they succeeded, that's the kind of guy I want. So I think it's you can never, be black and white with it one way or the other, but I do think that the way that you're explaining looking at prospects will become more popular as certain teams get more defined systems.
Yeah, I like that, and I like the way you put that because you're a real film buff. You break down a lot of films, so you know more than many people that I talk to, and probably many in the industry, about what you just said. I think with me, I see it as such. I hope so, because not only will that add parity with dispersion of talent in college football, it's like edge rushers can go to Buffalo and get drafted in the top 5 if you're great. Ask Khalil Mack. It doesn't matter with edge rushers. Now with corners, my pushback to that is, you take anybody from the Georgia defense from 2 years ago. Trayvon Walker went number 1. Jordan Davis went, 16 or 17, 19, whatever it was.
Yeah, Nakobe Dean.
He dropped to the second round because, for a couple of reasons, but also he was a linebacker.
Walker.
He was a linebacker in that core with that front. It's like, wouldn't that could potentially be a deterrent when you have an all-star team of 11 players who are pretty much all NFL guys? Like, I've looked at Keely Ringo from Georgia, 6'3", corner. I'm like, the Cardinals need a corner in the second round. It's like, well, is this Georgia or is his? He has some shortcomings of his own, but it's like when you play behind one of the best fronts in football, in college football, does that make your job easier? Which in turn, does that make your translation into the NFL game not as great as what the measurables may see? That's kind of what I look at it as. And with these advanced analytics and stuff, I don't have any idea. You can take numbers and skew them however you want. You can do whatever you want. But I just begged the question because Jeff Okudah, former number 3 overall pick, had injury concerns, never did anything really, never showed any sort of real promise in Detroit, and now is with Atlanta for a throwaway 5th round pick.
Right. From a 1st round pick, number 3 overall, now for a 5th round pick. What a loss on investment there, just banking on a guy who, played at a high level in a Power 5 conference. I think that'll always be a dance in the NFL, quite frankly, of the traits that a guy has that could make him more than what he was in college versus his experience in college. That'll always be a debate, but I agree with you in the way that you're looking at it. Some teams are probably going to start to lean more on the traits and the measurables than maybe the experience, which, 10 years ago, it could have been flipped. It could be 60-40 one way and it's flipping 60-40 the other way. You know what I mean? It absolutely could happen. But with that in mind, we are going to get out of here. That's going to do it for a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Remember, Monday through Friday, NFL content all year long, all platforms, always for free. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for Friday's show with Chris Carter and your boy Q, breaking down all the latest in the NFL. Me and Alex will be back with you guys next Thursday. And everybody stay safe out there and enjoy your weekend.